Hey there, awesomes, and welcome back to another episode of Self-Worth School. School is back in session. These are your lessons on becoming your happiest, most confident self. You have me again for a solo episode. I promise I have got some awesome guest lineup, but there are some really key things and messages that I want to share, and a lot of things that I've been talking about recently that I feel need to go to the wider world. And today's lesson is something that we are surprisingly or unsurprisingly bad at as women. And that's about celebrating ourselves without cringing. And I know in my heart that even if I say that, even, just as I say that about celebrating ourselves, some of you have just winced or cringed. And when we're talking about celebrating ourselves, we're not talking about in like a loud and performative, like, look at me type of way. We're just talking about in like an honest, healthy way. So, what we're going to be covering in today's lesson is about why so many women struggle to feel proud of themselves, the difference between confidence and ego, because that's something that comes up a hell of a lot, how we shrink our wins without even noticing, how to accept compliments without cringing, and how to build a simple system that helps you actually remember who you are and what you've done so you don't end up minimizing it over time. Now, I recently became a runner up as Life Coach of the Year at some national awards that are in Birmingham. And I'm genuinely proud of that, as I should be. It feels validating, to get that recognition of peers. It builds credibility and, it's recognition for the years of work that I've done so far. But at the same time, there is part of me that thinks, oh God, people are like bored of hearing about, my awards because I'm lucky enough to have either been nominated or put myself forward for a number of awards over the past 6 months. And, logically, we know that not everybody sees every post. I don't remember, like, no, there's that old adage, nobody's thinking about you as much as you think that they're thinking about you. But there's, and so I know logically that not everybody would have seen that. And the people that are thinking that, it probably says more about them than perhaps it does about me. But the point is that, there's still part of me thinking, oh, is this too much? Am I that kind of person? So even me, even someone who literally teaches this stuff about owning your worth and celebrating yourself, still notice this instinct to kind of shrink or not celebrate or go on about it too much. And I think this shows that it's not just your issue. It's not an issue that, a small people, a small group of people struggle with. It's cultural. And it's not necessarily about ego. It's about how comfortable or uncomfortable we get with being seen, being praised, or being seen to be proud, and what we think it makes people then think about us. So today we're going to talk about being able to celebrate yourself properly without ego, without apology, and without shrinking it. So let's get into it. So in terms of like the struggle that we all share when it comes to, to celebrating ourselves, the reason why sometimes it feels a bit ick is because as we grow up and when we're at school and when we're with our peers, we're kind of taught that being proud of ourselves is like showing off. And we fear being judged for that. Are people going to think that we're arrogant or that we think we're better than them? But there's also the other side of it where we have that level of perfectionism for ourselves, where we're happy to just kind of shrug it off and say, it wasn't actually that big a deal. We kind of almost don't want people to think it was a big deal because then we need to deliver it again. So then or we think that we're taking attention off other people. And so we'll be, yeah, but I had help. I didn't just do it on my own. So and so did this. And like I say, I think there's definitely that fear around being too much. And another thing that I think feels difficult sometimes is that when we are growing up, we're often praised for our achievements rather than who we are. So we're praised for the things that we've done rather than just, the qualities that we have. And then that makes you feel like, in order to celebrate yourself, you have to have done something big, whose idea of big is obviously depends on one person to the next. But I think what that does create is this sense of like always moving the goalposts. So you've hit the thing, you've achieved that, you've passed an exam, you've won that award, you've won that promotion. Now it's like, okay, that's done, right? Tick the box. What's next? What's next? And I think even though there is an element of most women struggling with like arrogance or how it might make them arrogant, I think there's also that struggle with shame, like how we receive, how do I receive this, this praise, this celebration in a way that makes sure I don't come across as something that I need to, protect myself from. Ask yourself these questions. Do you squirm when somebody praises you publicly? Do you tend to immediately downplay your wins as soon as somebody, oh, but I was up against so and so people? And do you move the goalpost the second that you hit it? Are you like, okay, what's next? What's next? We tend to be good at achieving things, probably better than we think that we are, but we're not very good at stopping long enough to register that we've achieved them, to give ourselves that recognition for the things that we're doing, before we then say, okay, well, I've done that now, so what's next? What other way am I needing to prove myself? And I'm going to share a couple of personal examples of where this comes up for me personally and where I believe it's come from. So on that kind of shame piece, but also the arrogance piece as well. When I was at school, I was a bit of a, not bookworm, that's not really the right word, but I used to be called a bod, and I was bullied a lot for sometimes being a bod. Sometimes they used to say that I looked like a gibbon, which is a type of monkey. Kids are cruel, aren't they, really? But one thing that really sticks in my head is like putting my hand up in class because I knew the answer. And I tended more to get bullied through friends that weren't really friends, if you know what I mean. And they would take the mickey out of me because I put my hand up. They'd kind of imitate me. And yeah, there were just other circumstances of where I achieved at school, whether, I was leading the school play or I was proud of something. And I absolutely understand that it is a possibility that my pride did not come across with any sense of humility. There is every chance that I could have been a bit of a dick about it, but I think it's difficult to say how much of that was me being a dick about it and not having that sense of humility and seeming like I was just arrogant and loving myself. Although arguably, what is wrong with loving yourself and thinking that you're good at something? Like I say, this is part of the conditioning that we have, that you're not supposed to be that much in love with yourself. You're not supposed to be that pleased with yourself. You're not supposed to think that you're that good. I suppose only when it becomes a problem is whether or not you feel like you're better than other people. And maybe that's something that I triggered in other people, but it's certainly nothing that I consciously had in mind. In fact, getting bullied would obviously make me feel the opposite. It made me feel like I wasn't liked, and that maybe that was part of the reason. So I think if that is something that maybe you've been through, whether as a direct experience or not, I think those are things that can also stop you from celebrating yourself, because there'll be those old beliefs that built in childhood that said, don't put your head up above the parapet, don't love yourself too much, don't look conceited because people won't like you. But there is real power in self-celebration and being able to openly and honestly own your wins. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be publicly. I had this conversation with the women in my self-worth projects last night on one of our group calls. It's not, you don't necessarily have to tell everybody else and convince everybody else that you're, a phenomenal person or that you did something well, as long as you know it, because really that's the most important thing. That's where you're going to carry your energy from. And self-celebration is part of that. It activates your brain reward system. So it releases those good feel good chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, things like that. And that in turn boosts your motivation, which means you're more likely to achieve other things. It also increases self-trust, which I speak about so much on this podcast and with my clients. Like, it's one of the key things and key issues that I see is lack of self-trust with women. It's all linked to self-worth. But if you follow through and achieve something, no matter what that is, you prove to yourself that you're capable, that you can set a goal, that's something that you say you're going to achieve, and that builds self-trust, and that self-trust is so important. And it also increases that emotional resilience as well, because it gives you something positive to fall back on about yourself. So, celebrating yourself, it's not vanity, it's reinforcement about who you are, what you're capable of, what you have to give in the world. And if you never let yourself feel proud, then your brain will never learn that effort equals reward. You'll just learn that effort or hard work leads to nothing, leads to stress, leads to lack of time or energy. And then that is going to affect your consistency because you're not going to see the benefits of that coming through. So, this isn't just about, love yourself and celebrate yourself and make sure that you're giving yourself a pat on the back. Like, it is important, not just for that celebration in the moment, but for your kind of happiness, well-being, consistency, momentum, self-trust overall. The more that you celebrate yourself, the more that there will be to celebrate ultimately. And just remembering that I covered this topic recently in the Self-Love Saturdays and one of my Self-Love Saturdays workshops, and what we spoke about next was about spotting the shrink, spotting the thing that we do when we downplay our wins. And one thing that I would ask you to do is listen to your language, listen to the language that you're using. So there'll be classic lines like, oh, it was nothing, it wasn't really hard work, or like, I just got lucky, right place, right time, oh, anyone could have done it really. Anyone who'd been doing this for half the time would have been able to do it, or it wasn't that big of a deal. And it might be something that you said out loud, it might be something that you thought to yourself, but I'd love you to think of a recent win that you had, maybe big or small. It could be something as good as like setting a boundary and saying no to somebody. It could be maybe you hit some kind of target in your business or at work, or maybe you just kind of got through a hard week, or maybe there was some kind of thing you were looking to do, whether it's like fitness, diet, or just, personal improvement, and you hit it. Now, what did you say about it? It'd be like, oh, yeah, but I probably won't be able to do that again. Or let's say it wasn't really that big a deal. But did you shrink it? Did you pretend that it was less? And then I want you to reframe it and think, no, actually, it was something, especially if it was something that you worked for, that you worked towards. It was something, and you are allowed to feel proud about it, and you worked for it, most probably. And if, your best friend had done that, you'd be celebrating her properly, no matter what it was. Like I say, whether it was something good or small, you'd be giving her that encouragement. You'd be telling her that you're proud of her. So why is she allowed pride and you're not? Like, shrinking, it sounds humble, but all it does is erode confidence over time, because you're saying basically that your achievements and the things that you do don't matter. And the next thing we're going to talk about is accepting compliments without cringing, another way to celebrate yourself. So, this is basically just the premise that when we accept compliments, often we kind of brush them off. Or one of my favorites is, because I do often try and compliment people, not just for how they look, but if you've met a stranger, you don't always have a lot to go on. But if I see someone that I think their style's really nice, or their hair looks good, or whatever, I will give someone, a random person, a compliment, because I know what it's like to receive them, and I think it's a really lovely thing to do. But I always love when I tell someone, oh, I love that thing that you're wearing, or that looks great on you, and they'll always go, yeah, like £5 Primark. We've got like this thing of like saying how much or how little something costs when it comes to getting a compliment. But yeah, the idea around accepting compliments without cringing is the fact that thank you is a full sentence. Like you don't need to say thank you, I got it here, or thank you, it's just that, or thank you, I didn't mean to do X, Y, and Z. Like you don't have to explain it away. Receiving that compliment and just saying thank you, they're not going to think, oh God, what an arrogant woman for not excusing that somehow. It just makes you human. And actually rejecting compliments is, it is a little bit rude, really. Someone gave you a gift and you don't want to throw that back. Your job or your only job when somebody compliments you is to receive it. So I'd love you to think about when you last received a compliment and perhaps how you responded to that. And actually, what was your favorite last compliment? Because I think it's a lovely thing to remember these. I shared this on my LinkedIn page earlier today about the favorite compliment that I received recently. And it was a month or so ago. I was out having a drink at the local pub with my older sister, and she knew some people that were sitting on the table next to us. And I saw her go over to chat to them. And then her and one of the women kind of glanced my way and were smiling. And I heard like the words life coach. So I gathered my sister was telling her about what it was that I did. And this woman, as I got up to leave, she kind of smiled at me and I said hello. And she said, you've got such a lovely aura about you. She said, I noticed as soon as you came in, like it clocked, it's such a lovely energy and aura. And honestly, it was the best compliment that I've received in ages, bar the ones that my wonderful partner gives me. Just because for somebody to not really know me or really know a lot about what I do, but to sense that from my presence, the fact that that's the energy I give off, it's always something that I try to do in how I carry myself. I always try to bring that kind of openness, warmth, like happiness, joy, welcoming feel. And that was something that somebody sensed, and the way she said it and smiled at me, it was just, yeah, it really, really touched me. And yeah, I just said thank you and told her how much that meant, that it meant a lot, and that it was a really kind thing for her to say, because it was. And that meant I could receive that, feel good about it. And like I said, that still sticks in my mind now. And the next thing we're going to talk about is moving from what you've done to who you are. So I mentioned earlier, often when we're thinking about celebrating ourselves, we're often thinking about what we've done, what we've achieved in that sense, rather than about qualities that we have as well. And those are so important. A little bit like that, the thing of her noticing my aura, that was a quality. It wasn't necessarily based on my appearance. It was just, a quality that somebody carries. And, you can celebrate yourself for having qualities like being patient, or your creativity, or being brave, or being kind, or being resilient. So thinking about celebrating yourself for who you are, not just what you do, because who you are kind of creates what you do. And who you are at your core is the thing that you absolutely should be celebrating most. And if you're not sure what those qualities are that you would love to celebrate about yourself, I would say to you, like, what do people come to you for? Do they come to you advice? Do they come to you for when they want to feel better? Do they come to you when they need motivation or drive? Also, what have you grown through? Because often we find our biggest bits of growth. I know that going through my fertility journey definitely increased both my patience and my compassion for others. I definitely became more selfless because I became aware of, it made me think about what I was going through that people wouldn't necessarily know of, and what a lot of other people must be going through as well. What compliments do you tend to get quite often? Again, you're probably used to shrugging them off, but there's probably a theme to the things that people, that people say about you. Ultimately, you don't have to win an award to be worthy of a celebration. You are worthy of celebrating just as you are. And the more that you remind yourself of the qualities that make you you, and that are valuable to you and to others, the more confidence and happiness you're going to feel. And the more confidence and happiness you're going to feel, then the more you'll, take those opportunities. You'll go out and create the life that you're dreaming of. And as always, we tie our lessons back to self-worth and why this matters for self-worth. And hopefully the message is relatively clear, but self-worth, it isn't just about believing that you're capable. It's about believing that you're allowed to feel proud, like I say, exactly because of either the things that you've achieved, no matter what they are, or because of who you are. I know that deep down, winning awards doesn't change my worth. Like I say, I've been lucky enough to be finalist for, at least 3 other awards in the last 6 or so months, and I didn't win those. But even though obviously there was still that natural element of disappointment because it would be lovely to win, it didn't change my sense of self-worth. It didn't mean that I questioned how good I was at my job, because I can look at my client testimonials for that. I can look at how well my business is doing, and I can look at how happy I feel in delivering the work that I do and the impact that I'm making to tell me that. So yes, winning awards are amazing, but it doesn't change my worth. But allowing myself to feel proud of my work and what I'm building, that's what reinforces my identity, because that's what links back ultimately to my purpose and why I'm doing it in the first place. Celebration, it only feels like something that's performative or forced or uncomfortable when it's disconnected from truth. And most of the time it is connected to truth. You're just not seeing the truth of that. You're not allowing yourself to feel and experience that. But when it's honest and you're able to accept and kind of review the achievement that you've got honestly, that's when it's more grounding. And like I said before, the more that you practice celebrating yourself and actually being proud and letting stuff land and not worrying about being conceited or what people might think, or that it's going to set standards or expectations too high, the more natural it becomes and the more that you do it. Ultimately, you're allowed to feel good about yourself. You don't need that permission. You don't need to have done or reached a certain level. You don't have to be a certain person. You're allowed to feel good about yourself just because you're who you are. So the main takeaway then, if there's one thing that I want you to think about and remember and take away from this podcast, it's that feeling proud of yourself and celebrating who you are and what you do does not make you arrogant. Celebrating yourself, it isn't ego, it's self-trust. It's acknowledging yourself for the things that you do and the person that you are. And that reinforces that self-trust, your identity, and your confidence. And one action that I would love you to do to take away from this podcast is creating your own self-celebration statement. This is something that we did at our Self-Love Saturdays. I just want you to complete a really simple sentence, and that is, I'm proud of myself because, and then enter that there. So it could be something you've achieved. It could be a quality that you are proud of having, of owning, of expressing. And there's no caveat to that. Just, I'm proud of myself because, not when I, or not if I, or not once I achieve, but just because. So not once you've fixed everything, not once you've hit the next milestone, just because. Keep it honest, keep it simple, keep it true. It might be something like, I'm proud of myself because I kept going, even when it was hard. I'm proud of myself because I handled X, Y, and Z differently. I'm proud of myself because I show up even when it feels uncomfortable. You don't need public recognition. You don't need to justify it. You just need to feel it. And if you're brave enough, I would genuinely love to hear your self-celebration statements. If this landed with you, if you've done it, if you've got something in your mind, please do send it to me on Instagram, on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you're listening to this. Tag me, DM me. You don't have to do it publicly. You can just send it to me on a DM. Just share your self-celebration statement with me and let me celebrate you properly. Like, we don't do enough of that to each other. And I think there's power in kind of saying it out loud, even to somebody else. It kind of makes it a little bit more real. And if this episode made you realize how often you tend to shrink your wins or downplay yourself, you might find my inner confidence block quiz helpful. It's free to take, it only takes about 5 minutes. It's a really simple way to see what's really sitting underneath your confidence patterns and what's stopping you from, being visible, speaking up, celebrating your wins. There are 5 different confidence archetypes that I've seen from women that I work with. And usually people fall more under one than the other. And that's the thing that causes you to shrink, not celebrate your wins. So if you feel like it would be useful to know, it will tell you your archetype. It will give you some information on that. And it'll also give you a move to get out of that. So I'll put the link in the show notes. And finally, if you know somebody who struggles to feel proud of themselves, I'm sure you probably know more than one. Because like I say, us women definitely struggle with that. Then please do send this episode to her, because sometimes we just need permission from someone else to kind of stop dismissing ourselves. And I know as well, it means so much to me when I think that somebody that I care about or that cares about me, whether that's a colleague or a friend, if I know that they've been thinking of me in a positive way and wanting me to, be happier in myself, that makes me feel good. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. Like I said, I'd really love to know if this one resonated with you. But yeah, you're allowed to feel good about what you've done. You're allowed to feel good about who you are. And I will see you in the next lesson. Have a great day.